Welcome to Portals of Perception and to the Universalis Project episode number 12. We just landed episode 11 and felt that this deserved a new start. Episode 12, I'm here with Heney and Kyriaki Nikandrou. Welcome.
Hello, Karen. Hello, Aviv. Looking forward to the continuation of our conversation.
Yes, hello, Aviv. Hello, Kyriaki. And let's see where we go next.
Well, so in episode 11, Kyriaki brought to focus one dimension that emerged over the weekend journey with the Epoch network, and we focused on the nature of two struggles. The struggle with the known, confronting the known, and the second struggle of embracing and relaxing into the unknown. And Kyriaki framed the third struggle, which is integrating them both into a whole person experience. And we developed some of the dimensions of awareness in that. And Karen, you invited us to trace and bring to focus the significance of a change in an operating system, because in episode 10, we described how the modern world, the modernity project of the last few centuries, developed an infrastructure that governs states and worlds and global institutions, and how these are coming to a point of obsolescence. We were trying to offer a bit of a, dare I say, esoteric point of view about why it was captured and is imploding. And if you haven't watched episode 10, you may want to go and watch it. And you said, let's bring this into focus again, more in the context and the significance of contemplating about a universalis human, in the discovery of what that means. And I'm about to offer headway into this. In fact, let me do this, and then I'll invite both of you to comment on this. I'm going to do directly the first step, and then allow you to play with that for a bit. So I'm going to bring this slide. See, this was our originating catalyst that emerged now more than a year ago in a conversation we called The Thousand Faces of Homo Universalis, conversation with Jeff Vanderkloot, where he made some comments that ultimately catalyzed us into the project of beginning to decode and describe these. There's still a possibility that we will update the language here, we will add more, that we will turn these into symbolic and artistic expression, all of that. These are ideas for future projects. But this morning, reflecting that in a few hours we will be the three of us here in this exploration, I asked myself a new question. I asked, well, what is the unifying nature of all these dimensions, all these faces? And I'm not going to ask you to play the riddle. You know I love to play riddles. I'm not going to ask you to try to answer it now, although you can in your mind. And anybody watching us, you can in your mind say, well, you can press pause here and say, what is the unifying nature or the unifying theme of all those faces, all of those dimensions? Well, when you think about space makers, self-regulation artists and self-care masters, mental and spiritual healers, blockage releasers and stop situations redeemers, somatic and soul harmony replenishers, purpose-tethering architects, inquiry framers, and listening priests. We did quite a bit of work into this space. So we mostly worked into space making and inquiry, framing, and listening, perception openers, and, connectors and integrators, new evolutionary configuration makers, psychoactivating teachers and transmitters, and those at the bottom. When you think through all of them, they each represent some kind of a change or a transformation from one state to another state. When you make space, you push the void or you push the crowded ecology to create new space. You change something in the ecology. When you regulated yourself and facilitated and helped others regulate themselves with self-care, you help them shift from one state into another state. Certainly when you acted in the capacity of facilitating and encouraging mental and spiritual healing, you helped and facilitated people through some kind of a transformative, transmogrifying, healing uplift. So there is a change from one state to another state. And literally you can go frame by frame, box by box, face by face, and say, they each represent some kind of change. So then I ask a different question. I ask the next question, which is, so what is the currency? What is the currency of all those universalis faces? And you can ask the question in a different way. What is the currency of change? What is the currency of transformation? And the simple answer is that if you are, now we're talking basic physics, right? If you're going to change a state of an object from one state to another, you need to do what? You need to invest energy. So the currency of all those expressions of the universalis human is a particular, each represent a particular kind of energy or power required to, like, if we talk about presence and glow generators, essence generators and initiators, transformation catalysts and flow enablers, developers of ceremony practices, and even invisible worlds decoders, they each involve an energetic dimension, some dimension of power that facilitates the process by which they do what they do. Possibility and pathfinder weavers. Most definitely elevation midwifery facilitators. And yes, shadow sublimators and light instigators and emergence decoders and champions. So the currents, the current and the currency of the work we are inviting here is unique dimensions of energy or power to help activate those latent capacities. And I'm about to lead us into today, focus mostly on these two: blockage releaser and stop situations redeemers, but even more so, new configuration makers. But let me pause here and see if there is anything you want to offer just on what we're inviting in terms of perception and realization about the nature of these dimensions and the significance of power and energy as the currency of a universalis function.
What I'm feeling, which is unusual because normally it would be some order of mental a contribution, but somehow the feeling I have from looking at this question links back to what we've been previously talking about, in that I can't answer it from where I was. I can't answer it from the known. And I'm actually registering the sense of being in a void of change. And what I'm sensing is to work into any of these and to answer the question, which I can't even quite remember what exactly that was. But it's to do with somehow connecting to a new form of energy and different potency, and that in its way will require a different location in my human system, in where I come from to answer this. So I'm not going to say any more because that's just a very first registration of, in a way, living what we're talking about rather than it being a historic response that may or may not facilitate.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen, for presencing the actuality of what we are describing. It's very easy we're using words, but what you just did, you demonstrated a core practice that we engage in this work, which is when a question is presented, we enter contemplative space. And one of the practices of contemplative inquiry, so that's inquiry framers and listening priests listening also inside, one of the core practices which you demonstrated is resisting traveling with the mind to all the known and ready-made references, to in a way crowd the potential of a new space, because when we ask a new question, we potentially are expanding the space. That's one of the earlier Universalis journeys. We demonstrated this idea of using the art of inquiry to expand space. And what you demonstrated is that a way of being with it is actually resisting the front brain, the ready-made library of references. And what you do is you let the question permeate the whole of your person. Because when we talk about new energy, new power, we are talking about, yes, mental dimensions are part of it, but often a feeling life and other registrations and sense organs that may be activated through the abiding and being with the inquiry in an open-ended way, unless we actually make the space for it, we miss an opportunity to birth something new. So if this, for a moment, sounds a little abstract, one can also ground what I just described by understanding of brain science. Okay, so when I am with a new question, literally, the synaptic cleft is seeking to make new connection. That's why I love calling this experience of stepping into the unknown, stepping into the synaptic cleft of possibility. Because you're literally saying, I'm going to allow myself to be saturated by and immersed by multiple options, and I'm going to be discovering where the conductive current of the inquiry leads me next, which is what we do when we get interested in what we are discovering, and also in what we are sometimes saying when we are speaking in the way I'm speaking now, whereby you listen to the discovery of the process in the way it emerges in you. And one can do so by speaking, and often a very powerful way of doing that is even resisting the words, staying in the pre-words, pre-linguistic, conductive zone of feeling and registration and awareness, where imageries, for example, can emerge even before words, imageries and feelings. Let me pause here and give Kyriaki a chance to speak to that.
Yeah, I find it a fascinating notion that a unifying nature of all these dimensions is power, in the sense of potency, in the sense of a moving energy. And I would say also that it has a positive, in the sense, positive, for instance, the healers would heal someone, or the midwifery facilitators would birth something new and good and true and beautiful. So there is also an elevating and sublimating movement to this power, a sense of service and function in all the 1,000 faces. And also in thinking maybe about the big figures of the past, the Homo Universalis of the past, they were powerful people. But I think the power, they connected to a source of power that was driving them. And for some, maybe it has been mental, maybe it has been planetary, above planetary, I don't know. But to a source of power that was driving them, and that they were representatives of. So I'm also thinking of how we can plug into the powers that maybe each box is representing a source of power or a spring of energy. So that's what's coming up.
Well, so let's take this awareness of its power and energy of a particular quality with a particular teleology of development, of growth, of refinement, of improvement, of more goodness, more truth, more beauty. Let's take this on a journey to focus on new configuration makers. And I'm going to integrate into it a theme, another theme that appeared over the weekend. And so this becomes our focus now, new configuration makers. And a theme we played with was the idea that you become what you think about. And you can trace that idea all the way to Buddha and Marcus Aurelius and many great people throughout history who invited this proposition that you become what you think about. And right next to it, a similar and adjacent idea, which is that to think it is to cause it to be, as a great teacher once said. And we paused these two briefs and asked, well, what is the kind of thinking? What kind of thinking enables these outcomes? What kind of thinking truly enable you to become what you think about and to cause something to be because you think about it. Because clearly the message in that is not that if you think about horses all day long, you'll become a horse. Trust me, you won't become a horse. But what is true is that if you work with horses and you sensitize yourself to horses and to their ways, you can become very attuned and very much with the capacity to read the horse, to read the energy field of the horse, and to read through the lead horse, the energy of the whole herd. So you can develop that capacity. You can actually develop that sense organ by working with horses over a long period of time, especially when you do so with dedication, with love, caring for horses. So, in that sense, to think it is to cause it to be, is not that you made yourself a horse, but rather that you made yourself a tool and a vessel of the life of the horse. So, okay, so what do we mean? What kind of thinking enables these outcomes? And sometimes the best way to begin contemplating what something is by answering what it is not. So, well, one thing we know, it is not habitual thinking. So that's a build on this idea of not staying just in the known. We also know that it's a non-linking thinking. Linking is when you drive in your car, and you see a sign on the road, and it reminds you something else, and then the song in the radio that you heard first time when you were 9 plays, and then it links you to where you were 43 years ago when you heard this song for the first time, and you go through a whole chain of linking. You're not really thinking. You're literally linking through the experiences that are recorded in your blood, that is flowing through your head, that is bringing up these memories. So it is not linking. It is also not a thinking that's locked in pattern. So that's, again, an appreciation that it is about stepping outside of the grooves of what we know. And it is also not the kind of thinking that disperses your power, that weakens you, that disempowers you, that diminishes your sense of who you are or what you can do, what you can become. Because a lot of what people process through their head is actually the disjointed byproduct of having lost power, having lost strength, because of whatever occurred to them or whatever triggered them. So it's none of all those kind of processes. They are not the thinking that leads you to become what you think about or to cause something to be. It is also not the kind of thinking that is limited in the smaller, limited, shrunk down you. That's why we often come back to what are the shrinkage moves that people make and why do they make shrinkage moves, and what are the ways to relax those shrinkage moves to expand the space of who you are as a human being. And finally, it is not the anxious preoccupation. A lot of people, when they talk about thinking, they don't actually think. It's a background humming noise of some degree of low-level or mid-level or high-level anxiety. This is not a criticism. Many people are operating in dynamics and circumstances and through life experiences that left tremendous amount of traumatic scar tissue that will continue to produce fear-based, anxiety-based, protective, guided thoughts. All of those are not what we invite in the idea of you become what you think about. And to think it is to cause it to be as the modalities or the processes or the energy sources that new configuration makers will use. And I am obviously using or bringing this up as a bridging idea to the invitation that when we talk about the journey from one epoch to the next, and we are now living in a space in between two epochs, that the new epoch is needing a new OS, operating system, and we're looking for a different language so it doesn't feel mechanical, enabling system, causing system, a new system of energy possibility. We are inviting that the new configuration makers is part of that. So now I'm traveling back to the same question to see what can I say, having said what it is not, see what I can say as a starter prod into what perhaps is the nature of this special kind of thinking. Well, first, it is abiding. And you demonstrated a few minutes ago, Karen, that abiding, one of the ways of abiding is staying with a question, actually resisting the temptation and the tendency to answer the question. The esoteric significance of that is building higher intensity, greater conductivity with the question rather than escaping the question into the easy first possible answer. Abiding does that. Abiding does more. It's one way of describing abiding. And imagining. Well, so again, I am using imagining in a special kind of way. It's not an imagining that I just imagined for a minute something that I want to have. No. One example, obvious examples in the business world is Walt Disney. So he truly imagined what became the Disney world, and he, whether you like the concept of a Disney world or not is secondary to the example. He imagined that he wanted to create a place, a park where children would be able to come and be on a never-ending adventurous discovery that will make them joyous and happy. So that was what he imagined for many years, and it took him many years to build that. Another example of imagining is Steve Jobs, because he imagined devices that will enable us to do what we couldn't do before. But you can travel to earlier times and describe Florence Nightingale, who knew that something did not make sense. People did not have to die in the way people were dying, in the way that care was exercised and served to them. And she imagined a different way of offering care. And as a result of her imagination, a whole new practice of nursing came into this world with specific disciplines and requirements. So when we talk about to think it is to cause it to be, these are three examples that come to mind. The third dimension I will highlight is creating, and once again, I am describing creating first in one's mind. And you may travel in your thought to your favorite composer, or your favorite artist, or your favorite sculpture and the way that sculpture was created. In all of those cases, there is someone that imagined and created something as a result of that imagination. I was obviously very much inspired by the story of the Sistine Chapel and how that extraordinary painting came to be, and what was it that Michelangelo was working to create with his team. So right there is an imagining and creating that begins with special kind of thinking. And then if you add to it more, it's a contemplative thinking. And we talked quite a bit in earlier explorations about the contemplative art, where we create space for that space then to be filled with new presence and new essence and new creativity. And I would add to it today that it's a connected thinking. So there is power that accompanies the thinking we're describing that's beyond you. It's you thinking inside your system with other realms of power, shall we say universal realms of power that you tether yourself to, you connect yourself to because of the love and the dedication of your life that enable you to, in the capacity of being in service of those powers, you can truly cause something to be. And finally, the last dimension I'll highlight is that when you do all of those things, you both shape the space, you create and make a space, and you shape the space, and you create a new cosmology, a new configuration inside of that space. So what comes alive for you when I'm endeavoring to describe some of the nature of thinking that is part of new configuration making in the mapping, the starter mapping that I'm offering here?
Yeah, what's beginning to come alive is I've been thinking about the word originality, and that had after one of the days at the weekend, and I was trying to gather some thoughts. I just wrote originality across a page with various other words around it because it seemed to be the only thing that wanted to be said. Sometimes I might write a poem or create. There was nothing else. It was originality. And that fits in with all of these. But what was beginning to come alive is I'm looking at black writing in boxes, but I'm seeing colored threads that have multiple ways of being configured in just so many new and original, exciting ways. There's nothing limiting. There's no reduction of possibility. There's no shrinkage. Everything is possible. And these are words that are very evocative of light and color and new potential. So it's a little bit of a painting picture in a way, but that was the very first. It was as if it was amorphic.
Yeah,
arising.
I can feel this from you, Karen, and I built a skeleton of this literally a few hours ago, knowing that we were going to speak, and I can feel from you that you would take this and play with colors and say, well, there is contemplative abiding, and there is connected abiding, and there is creative abiding, and you will begin to create the combinations and the different color set that goes with that, and it literally, rather than the two-dimensional slide, it becomes a shape-shifting kaleidoscopic permutation that you play with, and every time you shift the kaleidoscope and it offers you a new configuration, it brings to focus new potential. Beautiful.
I think this was birthed by the way of thinking that was talked about at the weekend, and it was new thinking. It wasn't really described, but it was evocative in the sense of I use the word originality because it had the sense that it would be different for everybody, and there was no pattern that had to be followed. And there's something liberating that is within this, the potency of what we're talking about. It's a new liberation.
Indeed. Yeah. So it's a double originality. It's there can be an originality in terms of a current that's emerging, and what you are describing is that in the plurality, in the gathering of people working together, each person's configuration will express that originality in an original way, where the emphasis is not, look at me how original I am. No, that's the personal identification. On the known side, it's more in the sense of you have a set of capabilities and faculties and inclinations and creative talents. So when we deal with a current that is engulfing our quest, our inquiry, you will naturally be able to express it in an original way, which is going to be a lot more colorful and beautiful than the skeleton that I'm offering here. But that's part of my way, and that's part of your way. And what we're saying, what we're sensing into, it's not about my way, your way. It's actually about the human way to unlock the greater potential of the universalis nature of human life. Please, Kyriaki, what would you want to say to what's alive with you about this?
Yeah. Well, when you said what is not the kind of thinking, I said, oh my God, what else is left? So, thinking of the 95 of the people and the 95% of our thoughts, maybe it's in the non.
Just for the record, so we don't appear to be all too elevated. We often ourselves are inside the 95% of the people that 95% of the time are grounded in the 5%. What we are making here is a unified, collective, mutualized endeavor to salvage ourselves from that into the 51% of the unknown. Please.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that really most of my day I am in the known area, with the linking, with the habitual, with the anxious, with all these kind of things. But at least a few moments that maybe there is a prospect of more effective thinking. All the examples that you said, the creative thinking, the abiding, the imagining, connected thinking. And it's interesting that in ancient Greek there was this word noesis, which is also, it's from nous. Nous is the mind, but also it's like iesis. It's very close to iesis. And I'm thinking that maybe it's a kind of thinking that has two axes. The one axis is more vertical, and it's maybe something that I'm missing from these 6 examples. And maybe it's the pinning, to pin yourself in an idea. So, for instance, the examples that you said with Disney, with Steve Jobs and Florence Nightingale, they had an idea and they stuck to this idea. They pinned themselves, and in a way, they allowed it. They allowed themselves to move vertically towards where it would lead them. And then there is a horizontal, which is more the contemplating, the abiding, the creating. It's the more feminine, it's the more yawing, it's the more maybe, what does it suggest? It's building, it's feeling it, it's mumming it, it's more, in a way, a feminine, yawing aspect. So, yeah.
Well, you're simply one step ahead of me. That's all that's happening here. And since you brought a Greek word, let me bring another Greek word. Because what these different, which you call horizontal, you're right. What you are looking for a teleology, for a directional or vertical or an uplifting vector. Well, so I am simply going to insert this, that those are different dimensions of prodding and exploring the unknown. And we're going to use here, because you emailed me last night something about the Acropolis. So I thought it's time to integrate the idea of Acropolis work and what Acropolis work is, and in which those natures of thinking becomes tools or capacities or dimensions of Acropolis work. So here is what you wrote to me last night. You didn't know that I was going to lift it up for this, so I'm surprising you. And I only changed a word or two, but I'll let you read it because it includes some words in the Greek language. So what was the Acropolis? Could you read this and whatever you want to ad-lib and add to it, please?
Yeah, it's Acropolis. It's a word that has two words in it. So the first word, it's acri. It's the higher point, it's the edge. And usually the Acropolises were built in the highest point of a city in ancient Greece. And there were many Acropolises, not just the Parthenon in Athens, so all around. And the second word is polis, which is representing the city-state in ancient Athens, in ancient Greece, but it's the collective, it's the we. Because, there was this idea that the human was made to live in a polis together with others, because otherwise he was either a god or a beast, if he wouldn't be needing others. So these were temples of connection where people used to gather in communion in various ceremonies and rituals to explore higher possibilities at the edge of discovery and beyond. And under the various temples of the Acropolises, there was always a theater. There was always a theater under it, where maybe these higher connections could be manifested and could be outplayed and could be celebrated. And there were always also healing places. And these healing places, they were not like modern hospitals. They were very different. They had the water element was very important in them. And the healers were also clairvoyants. And you would go there, you would cleanse yourself, you would sleep, and the healers and clairvoyants, they would interpret your dreams in order to be able to offer the healing necessary. for the people. Yeah.
So you're describing an Acropolis as a function. It had a function in ancient Greece. It was the place to find communion with new and higher possibilities at the edge and beyond. And so if we are to bring this function into this day and age, into the currency of a world in between one epoch to the next, we could suggest that to do an Acropolis or to do an Acropolis work is to prod, to explore, to nudge with all the human faculties available for us beyond the edge for connection and communion possibility. And that the work of an Acropolis, to do an Acropolis, is to seek to activate the whole human temple, the whole human template of capacities, to bring to life the fullest human potentiality with and through and for the releasing of all that's holding us back, all the stop situations that are holding us back, in service of the human cause within universal reason and purpose. So, if you listen to that and internalize that, it's easy for us to recognize that this is what we're trying to do in the Universalis Project. This is our brief. Universalis Project and the endeavor to detect, decode, appreciate wherever we see in the world, because many people are approaching this in their way. This is not something proprietary or done in one place. It is now arising in many, many places all over the planet, through different endeavors, through different modalities, through different language. What it is to do with, it is to do with a bridging work from one epoch to the next, and we are suggesting that Acropolis is a place or a process or a function whereby we surrender ourselves in service of the human cause within the universal reason and purpose of life. So now I want to build just a little more on that, because I want to propose that in the epoch journey and in the Universalis project so far, we primarily focused on 3 Acropolis frontiers. We primarily focused until now on 2, and today, through our conversation already, the third one is coming into greater focus. The first frontier we focused on, well, all of those are in the broader context of the search for a new operating system. That's why we focus and bring this idea of an Acropolis work. So the first frontier is the Acropolis of self. That's the Acropolis we each get to do on ourselves. So this is where we do the work of releasing personal stop situations. So over the last few years, we recorded several conversations in which we codified certain dimensions of it. In fact, the first time we used the word universalis was in a conversation a few years ago with Jeff Vanderklut. I think we call this conversation Homo Universalis Awakens or Alive. Do you remember, Kyriaki? It's been one of those. And at a segment in it, we're actually codifying the nature of shadow work and the 3 dimensions of shadow work. And we then, over the last few months, updated shadow work to describe the compensatory act of the soul and the appreciation of the ghost. And all of that is to do with releasing personal stop situations. So when we do the Acropolis of self, That's one of the first frontiers or dimensions we are exploring. And we ultimately do so to release and heal and transmogrify and to unlock new connections. Because as we just said, it's through new connections and new curative, healing, connective, creative powers that the Acropolis of self gets liberated. And then those are ultimately ways in which and pathways through which we do the healing work and the essencing work and the presencing work to do the evolutionary work of realizing our own unique individual evolutionary potential. So I'd describe that as a first Acropolis frontier, because unless we actually integrate ourselves as part of the exploration, we are not able to find the strength to go to and travel to the other frontiers. In other words, to attempt into the second and the third frontier that I will in a minute describe, without including and integrating the Acropolis of the self, would render us displaced or departed or distanced from the place where it naturally arises. So the integration of self is very important in this work. The second frontier is the Acropolis of many. So if the first is the Acropolis of me, the second is the Acropolis of we. And there as well, we are looking to do the work to release our collective, our whatever the collective is. The collective may be in a relationship with another person, may be in a family, so it will be releasing the familial stop situations. If it's in an organization, it will be the organizational stop situation, and so on and so forth. When you're endeavoring to create a larger mutuality, then it works by each person engaging with this idea of being self-authored. I am responsible, I'm in charge. I cannot delegate the responsibility of the Acropolis of self to another person, not to a teacher, not to a guru, not to a very wise person, not to anybody, because I'm the only person living inside me. So I have to engage with that first frontier. And oh, by the way, when I work in a relationship or with a group of people or with a team in the professional space or any other communal space, the strength of what we may be able to collectively release in terms of our stop situation is defined by the degree to which we are, first of all, applying ourselves, each one of us, inside. And then, that when we do so, we also facilitate the unlocking of new ways of being, new ways of collaborating, new ways of creating, new ways of togethering inside the mutualized space, to a point that we are more than just an aggregation of individual parts, because there is some kind of a combined, compound field of power and potential that comes alive. This is a space we're very much exploring with two friends in the Evolving Together series, where one of the discoveries and the realizations is what happens when people meet, like the three of us now meet, because we have the capacity to discover a whole new person inside ourselves with any and every new person we meet, because we bring alive, like in this situation, what happened last night. I was frankly a little bit exhausted after the weekend, and I wasn't sure what we will be doing today if we wanted to do a call, and I asked you, well, is there anything we could harvest? And you sent just a few lines, and it innovated, and all that was generated the seed last night, and mostly a couple of hours ago this morning. So unlocking new ways of being and creating together, and discovering the togethering and its potential. And then realizing that together there is a way for us to realize our evolutionary potential in a ways that we can never find on our own. That's the beauty of the message, Kyriaki, you offered from ancient Greece, that you're not meant to be on your own. You're actually a human being. You're meant to be with others. The only two situations you'd be on your own is if you are a god or if you are?
If you are a beast.
You're a beast.
An animal, I would say.
Right. Okay, so in other words, since we are not gods, and since we hope to transcend the beastly, animalistic nature of human expression, we need to have an Acropolis of many, the Acropolis of we. And then the third Acropolis frontier, which we are only going to see it here today, and we will come back to in the future because it's a very important space, is the Acropolis of power. And it includes disarming all the diminishing and degenerative usage of power. There is plenty of which in history. And so that will be a very important inquiry, because when we will enter the Acropolis of power, we will first rethread through the first two Acropolis frontiers. How and in what way do we use power in ourselves individually, and then the power when we come together as groups. And that's where there is a beginning of a discovery of the hierarchy of power, and how people establish hierarchy because they don't want to be in disorder. Another word for which is anarchy. But then we have all the pathologies developed inside the hierarchical structures throughout history. So how do we disarm those diminishing ways of applying power to also find new creative ways to distribute and to liberate power in a regenerative and safe way, where the premise is, again, unlocking the creative potential of all people? What might be some ways to do so? And ultimately, how do we generate power, create almost power out of thin air or out of nothing in service of the human cause and human evolution? So this is where, Karen, where you nudged us into when you said, well, we really ought to be prodding and exploring the new operating system, the new enabling system, the new system that supports life. Well, it is a build on what we did in episode 10 when we looked at why the modernity project and its program, its system, was running to a point of obsolescence. And so the Acropolis of power will lead us into the inquiry of systems, and what kind of systems do we use and how do we apply those. So this is what I got to in the little time I had this morning. I didn't have more time, so I didn't build the next slides to that, but I thought that will do as a starter to codify the idea that in the Universalis inquiry, we are in some way creating a modern or postmodern or metamodern or whatever is beyond that Acropolis function, which is a way of inquiring together into the potential of human life in service of the human cause, and that once we codify that, let us realize that we have been prodding and exploring these three frontiers of power. There will be other dimensions, but all the dimensions we will get to, in one way or another, they will build and use the self, the gathering of selves as the we, and the currency of life, which is power. So we could do an Acropolis of truth, and we could do an Acropolis of beauty, and we could do an Acropolis of goodness, and we could do an Acropolis of justice, and we could do an Acropolis of leadership system, and we could do an Acropolis of what will new way to govern at a city level, at a state level, will be about, and all of that will be an expression of these three. So I have about 7 minutes before I need to transition. So I'll invite you to offer closing comments.
Yes, well, I'll be brief. First of all, there's an extraordinary linking with what you were talking about before to do with we become what we think about. And I suddenly had a realization with the we, having done a trace of the epoch journey from our communal delegation aspect, I could see how that was actually an enlivening of that process, because there was history, and the history gives a substantia, and it gives the truth to the reality of we become what we think about. And that's one sort of slightly historic aspect, because the potential of what you have just outlaid is extraordinary. It's almost like I feel what I've been looking for a long time. It fits so much. And one other thread was the fact that Kyriaki talked about the theatre and the healing aspects. And I thought, that they are the whole, we've talked about ensoulment, and they're the embodiment when we talk about our self-regulation and our self-authoring and our theatre of our lives are the foundation, because these elevations and configurations that have the power and the conductivity and connections with the evolutionary realms need the healing self-regulation and the theatre aspects to be going on individually and collectively and multiply. There's much more to say, but I will mute.
Yeah, I want to say that it's a great proposition to build the Acropolis of the self, of the Acropolis of we, the Acropolis of power. And even the word power, I don't know, I want to change it. I think the ancient word dynamis, it's somehow, it's more potent. It has to do with dynamic, but also I want to say that maybe we are a temple. Each human life is a temple. And these ancient acropolises, they were, let's say in Athens, it was the Acropolis, the Parthenon, was dedicated to the goddess Athena. But maybe now the word theos, which means God, if you just change the first letter and you put a triangle, it has to do with the human. It's like the human and the aura around the human. So that is God. But if you change that and you put a triangle, it's turned, instead of theos, it's turned to theos. And theos, it means all. So I was thinking that maybe a part of the thinking process that will help us journey from, let's say, the stop situations of the three levels towards the propositional aspects and the promise of each. Maybe a way it's the awe, to be in a state of awe. And interesting, the word awe again It's a we. So it's one person, and A is the beginning also of Acropolis, and we. So the communal aspect, the being with, not just with other humans, the being with nature, the being with other realms, unseen worlds. I think also maybe it's a clue. But I find fascinating the proposition of discovering and building an Acropolis process within us, a new Acropolis.
And we have the gift and the benefit that you're living nearby the Acropolis, and when you talk about it, you have the living presence connection to a place you go to visit quite a bit, and you also give us the benefit of the access for the Greek language, so we get all that as a bonus in the exploration. So how about if we pause it here? This is merely a starter seed for some of the future conversations we will develop into those frontiers. Thank you so much for really instigating and making today possible, and so much more to be discovered, to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.